Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, and we will continue our lecture on chapter 2, the evolution of management thought. And then before you watch this lecture video on this particular chapter, I would recommend that each and every one of you to look first into the introductory video that I have shared in the learning activities. So once you have watched that video, it would help you to understand the development of the content in this particular chapter. So when you go into your learning activities, you can see that this is the introductory video that I've mentioned earlier on for this particular chapter. I would recommend that you watch this video first, and then you go back to the lecture video for this particular chapter, or for this chapter. All right, so this is what we are going to discuss. We need to describe in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, evolution of the management theory. That's the central core of this particular chapter. And then they talk a little bit on the job specialization, division of labor, and then identify the principles of management, administrative, and organization that underlie effective organization. And then we are going to look at the changes of the theories on how managers should behave to motivate and control employees, the contribution of management science to the efficient use of organizational resources. So we go first into the evolution of management theory. So there are 5 different theories that uh, undermine, or that not undermine, that there are 5 general theories that support the management that we are learning at in today's environment. So it all begin with the scientific management theory, and then it goes back and from 1890s to 1940s, and then later on in 1895 they have started with administrative management theory, and this theory has been prolonged a little bit longer than the scientific management theory. And then they started to develop on the behavioral theory, management science theory, and organizational environment theory. Why do we have different theories? Because if you look at the earlier video, then you can understand uh, from the industrial phase, and then they move into the managerial phase, the administrative phase, in terms of dealing with the employees. If we are talking about employees during early 90s, uh, they totally don't understand in terms of they don't demand that much. And then when employees they are becoming much educated, we are learning more, we are experiencing more, and then we have better technologies and whatnot. So the shift, that there is a shift in terms of the mindsets of the employees as well as the managers. What have become so important in the 1940s, for example, may no longer be applicable, because now the system is different, the people are different, the technologies are different, and then the environment is different. So that's why there are some changes in the management theory that we are dealing with. So it is all started with job specialization. One person does one particular job. That's how you become effective during that time. And then it is very important in terms of the division of labor in the late 18th centuries by Adam Smith. They said that if you look at how the manufacturing firms, you need to focus on job specialization and division of labor. The father of the scientific management is Frederick Taylor. He introduces the scientific management is a systematic study of the relationships between people and tasks for the purpose of redesigning the work process to increase efficiency. There are several principles of scientific management. They study the way workers perform their tasks, gather all the informal job knowledge that workers possess, and experiment with ways of how tasks are being performed, codify the new methods of performing tasks into written rules and standard operating procedures, so that they can teach other employees on how to follow that particular sequence of orders, and then carefully select workers who possess skills and abilities that match the needs of the task, train them to perform the task according to the established rules and procedures, and establish a fair or acceptable level of performance for a task, and then develop a pay system that provides a reward for performance above acceptable level. However, there are problems with scientific management. Many workers experiencing the reorganized work system found that as their performance increased, managers require that they do more work for the same pay. They don't pay any extra pay, but they ask them when once they become more efficient, meaning that they can produce more within the same time period, but they don't get that incremental pay increase, or they don't get any additional pay from their employers. And scientific management brought many workers more hardship than gain, and a distrust of managers who did not seem to care about workers' well-being. This is the followers of Taylor, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Analyze every individual action necessary to perform a task and break it into each of its components. So it's more on the division, go into very detail. Uh, they broken down the work into a flow chart, for example, into different components, so that they can understand on how to become more effective and efficient. And then we go to the second theory, administrative management theory. In this theory, the managers started to look into ways on how to create organizational structure and control system that leads to high efficiency and effectiveness. They started to believe that if we want to become more efficient and effective, we need to have a proper structure and a control system that can help the organization to be more effective and efficient. And the two scholars that are quite famous under the administrative management is Max Weber and Henry Fayol. Max Weber developed the principles of bureaucracy as a formal system of organization and administration designed to ensure effectiveness and efficiency. So they have a bureaucracy during this time. They started to learn about the Scala principle, unity of command, and then organizational structure. So it's very bureaucratic. This person would report to this person would report to this person can only communicate to this person above his level, and then and expect that this person would disseminate the information to the top, to the higher level. So they have that kind of bureaucracy. And then authority, the power to hold people accountable for their actions and make decisions concerning the use of organizational resources. So these are some of the principles of bureaucracy by Weber. We are going to discuss this in greater detail in chapter organizing. And then another important element that has been developed in administrative management theory is rules and SOP. Those are the things that are still here in our organization nowadays. Meaning to say that even though it has been created in the early 19th centuries, but it is still being applicable, because they believe that in order for us to become more effective and efficient, besides the structure, we need to have certain rules and standard operating procedures. So then, if you can follow all of this, it can help the organizations to achieve a certain level of effectiveness and efficiency. And then norms, unwritten informal codes of conduct that prescribe how people should act in particular situations and are considered important by most members of a group or an organization. The second scholar under administrative management theory is Henry Fayol. And one of the most famous principles that have been created by Henry Fayles is this principles of management. They've got, like, if I'm not mistaken, there are 14 principles which include division of labor, authority and responsibility, unity of command, line of authority, centralization, unity of direction, equity, order, and then initiative, discipline, remuneration of personnel, stability of tenure of personnel, subordination of individual, and esprit de corps. If you look at our today's operating environment in different respective organization, our organization today are still implementing and adopting to the concept and principles being described and developed by Henry Fayol in the early 19th centuries. So some of these principles are still applicable in many organizations today. The third theory is behavioral management theory. So in this theory, the behavioral management, the study of how managers should personally behave to motivate employees and encourage them to perform at high levels and be committed to the achievement of organizational goals. When they arrive at the behavioral management theory in the 1950s, during that time they started to believe that no, the employees, they become a little bit more knowledgeable, they start to have demands, they start to voice out their opinions, and then the unions of the employees have started to being formed, uh, and then the management start to think of, we need, men are not machine, men are not machine, so they are all, yes, we are all people, and of course they need to focus on the best way for us to motivate them. So they started to believe and create and shift into this behavioral management theory. One of the important scholar under behavioral management theory is Mary Parker Follett. Concerned that Taylor ignored the human side of the organization, suggested workers help in analyzing their job, suggested if workers have relevant knowledge of the task, they should be in control of the work process. This is one of the Horton effect. Studies how characteristics of the work setting affected work fatigue, and then work productivity is measured at various levels of light illumination. But I do not want to go into this detail. One of Another important element under this theory as well, behavioral theory, is theory X and theory Y by Douglas McGregor. Theory X, a set of negative assumption about workers that leads to the conclusion that a manager's task is to supervise workers closely and control their behavior. This manager assumes that every average worker is lazy, dislikes work, and will try to do as little as possible. Theory Y, a set of positive assumption about workers that leads to the conclusion that a manager's task is to create a work setting that encourages commitment to organizational goals. Assumes that workers are not inherently lazy, do not naturally dislike work, and will do what is good for the organization. So these are the two different sets of managers. We can try to differentiate what sorts of managers that we have at the moment. Some managers, we cannot blame them because they are under the school of thought of theory X. So they assume that all average employees are all lazy. So that's why they like to monitor, they like to supervise, they like to come to your desk, they like to give orders, to give new directions and whatnot. But managers under theory Y, they are a little bit of setback and relax because they know that the employees, they will do good for the organization. They believe that the employees will are not inherently lazy, and they will always ask for new directions and whatnot from the managers lah. So you can try to look at your current manager at the moment, and you can try to categorize them, which category that they are belong into, either theory X or theory Y. So I will stop here first, and we will continue in the next video, inshallah.